Okay, welcome to today's 17th of April. Welcome those online. Welcome all members who are here. Thank you. Staff, good morning. The first item on our agenda is Northland Transportation Alliance Transport Operations Briefing. We have Calvin online, Calvin Thomas, and Bernard Pedersen.
Morning, Your Worship. Just checking you can hear me okay?
Yeah. Yes, Calvin.
Yep. Cool. Bernard will be joining us in about 5 minutes. He got caught in some roadworks on his way to Kaikoui, but I will kick off in the interim.
Roadworks.
Yeah, good to see things are happening out there. I'll just kick off initially before we start with the presentation with responses to some questions from Councillor Vincent. So we did get asked for further clarity on the 230 culvert ends that were cleared, whether that was 230 culverts or 115. It was actually across 143 individual culverts, so 87 required cleaning at both ends, whereas the balance was only cleaned at one end. Further to that, the percentage of total number of culverts in the roading network. So at the moment, there is approximately 12,750 culvert assets. So of that, we're about 1.8% of those were cleared last month. The roading audit process, what's the relationship between the auditors and the people who've done the work? So the works are audited for compliance with contract specs and standards, with the audits undertaken by the KDC employed roading staff. So they are council staff undertaking the audits on contractors. And finally, the question about when the Whakapērā Road rehab will recommence. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get the dates on that as yet, but I will respond to that one following the meeting for you, Councillor Vincent.
Thanks very much.
Okay, so on to the presentation. Firstly, just highlighting the success of Northland Field Days. There was a road safety stand that was there. NTA and council staff partnered on that stand with Auckland Transport, Waka Kotahi, ACC, the police, and also Tasman Council came up with their seatbelt demonstration tool. So there was a range of interactive experiences. It was really good to see the seatbelt demonstration drawing a crowd, and a big shout out and thanks to Councillor Nair for giving that one a go. We received 69 individual suggestions from public about where break, rest stops and fatigue stops could be placed around Northland in addition to the ones we've already got. And we also had things like impairment goggles and checking, guessing of vehicle safety ratings and improving the knowledge of safety ratings there. So by all means, a very popular stand and getting the message across about road safety being everyone's responsibility in Northland. Moving on to inspections and audits from February. So 357 audits undertaken. So in the audit works category, we audited 50% of the works undertaken with one failed audit. In the routine works, we audited 81 jobs, and out of that 81 identified 20 failed audits, which has then flowed through into their performance scoring for later in the month. That has also resulted in more than double the audit focus for March in that area. So we're and also conversations with ourselves and Blair with Ventia around the focus on keeping the quality up through to the end of the contract period. If we move to unsealed network activities, we're still within the summer season, but obviously with the rain a couple of weeks ago, we're now starting to get right back into grading activities with more moisture in the aggregate. But we completed 1,500 unsealed pothole repairs, rehab works completed on Oruawharo Road and Lawrence Road, and drainage activities included over 1,100 metres of heavy water tabling, 155 culvert pipe metres of culvert pipes replaced, and as mentioned earlier, 230 culvert ends cleared. If we move to the next one on emergency works. So the emergency works completed in February. We're still continuing with that program. 166 different activities, including 2 major dropout repairs. And remaining for the program is 38 low complexity sites, which are all planned to be completed by the end of June, and the 15 phase 3 complex sites. Just a small update on that, noting that this is the February report. We're now in mid-April. The first 6 of the phase 3 sites, the initial investigation, geotech investigations have now been completed, and we're expecting the detailed designs back for them in mid-May. The other thing, during the month of March, all 3 councils, including KDC, went live on their websites with the interactive slip map, where it's got the pinpoints of the remaining phase 2 and phase 3 slips, where you can click on the slip and get information about the slip type, the status of the slip, and when estimated construction time frame is for those slips. So that seems to be getting some good engagement on the website at the moment, and we'll have more details on that in the March report. And finally, just an update on Mangawhai Shared Path Stage 3. So that really kicked off in earnest in February, with works commenced on that stage 3 part of the project. February included relocating that transformer outside the hub and installation of new service ducts and pouring of the first section. And for those going through that site regularly, we'll see some good progress happening there. That project is the primary driver of the capital carry forwards for into 24-25 next financial year, with that being a multi-year project. But it is on track and progressing well. And with that, I will just ask Your Worship if there's any questions.
Any questions, Calvin? Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Calvin. Got a couple, actually. And the first one relates to, I don't know whether it's page 9 or page 12 of your document. You've got a map, February 24 inspection completion, just underneath a paragraph.
Yep.
Have you got that page?
Yes, yes.
Now, I'm going to read it. Ventia have highlighted that because of unacceptable public and elected member behaviour towards on-site crews that have compounded over the last several months, they encountered challenges resourcing a crew to complete final works on Cove Road. Please elaborate.
Yes, so there was at least one occasion where Ventia traffic management crews were abused verbally by an elected member on the site of Cove Road. That was escalated at the time, as I understand it. But that was also in compounding with a lot of verbal abuse that was received by the crews when they were doing the works on that site during that period.
Well, look, I mean, I can understand, and look, it is unfortunate, you know, if any of these crews do get abused, but unfortunately, it's the nature of, I guess, what they see in terms of progress. Assumption you're on, but
That's
this
what?
whole thing about you, what you're doing is in saying this, because no names, you know, no pack drill, elected member involvement, and you say it's an elected member. You know, I'm happy to ask the question: are you specifically talking about me? Because I think that we need to clear this up. I can assure you that I only had, if it is me, I had one contact.
Point of order.
Oh,
This
well, it's
is a
not
totally
Councillor
inappropriate.
Paniora, it's not a council meeting, it's a briefing.
I don't
No,
think that.
Hang on, let Councillor Howard finish, please.
He has a conflict of interest in raising this question when he's being
Conflict of interest.
Look, I'm
accused.
not going to have this in a public forum. Look, please put it in writing.
Okay,
Through the chair, can I just address, this sentence was taken directly from the Ventia report. We will need to go back to Ventia to provide, to get further details. It was escalated at the time, but I can go back and find some further details.
Yeah, I don't think it's appropriate to clear it up, but I don't think we should be doing that in a public venue at this point in time.
Yep.
Thank you. Sorry?
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor No.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions on traffic management. There was a letter given by a constituent explaining, so we talked about risk-based traffic management and all a long time ago. It was on Bailey's Coast Road. It's a long letter in nutshell. For many days, the traffic people were there taking care of the road markers or little scratching and all. I can send you the letter later on, but my question to you is, still paying them a fixed price or giving them an opportunity to make money by delaying things and just wasting people's time? That's the first question.
So through the chair, just in reference to the transition to the risk-based traffic management framework, that is a national transition that's currently going through the trial phase. So in Northland, we are trialling that on a number of sites. With reference to sign maintenance, the sign maintenance is a activity that includes traffic management, and it is up to the contractor about how they comply with either risk-based or Copton requirements during this transition phase.
The second thing is, there are three questions, Mr. Mayor. The second thing is, you mentioned about elected member having a feel of the RAM in March. We are sitting in middle of April. That demonstration of how you operate RAM was to be shared with us at some point. It was promised to us that it will be done in the March meeting or something.
So through the chair, the offer is open for any elected member who wants to have a demonstration of RAM, and we take that through the governance team, then we're happy to do it.
Okay, and lastly, so the emergency works assessment on page 13, you have a detailed program, and some of them are estimated in Q1, obviously not completed yet. Do you have a time frame when the emergency works will be completed in terms of months or year?
So through the chair, as we've previously stated, the majority of the phase 2 works are anticipated to be completed in this financial year, which is by the end of June. The phase 3 works are incorporated into the 3-year program of the 24-27 LTP. Those are the I believe 15 in total in KDC that covers the sites I mentioned earlier, where there are 15 sites, and the first 6 of those have had their initial geotech full detailed investigation completed. So construction on the first of those 15 sites will start post-winter this year.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you, Calvin.
And Bernard did manage to join us after travelling through the roadworks, but appreciate your time. Thank you
very much. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is Road Naming Policy Review 2024. Is here that Sean will present this, or is it Hayley? Oh, there we are. There's Sean. Sorry, Sean, I didn't notice you there.
Good morning. I think most of you know me. Sean Baker, Principal Planner in the Consents team. Firstly, I'd like to say that if I look at, I'm peering at my paper a lot, it's because I don't have my glasses. I had a morning from hell and they're sitting in another car in Whangarei at the moment. So, yeah, so hard to read. No, it's okay. I can get through this. So road naming, draft road naming policy is basically part of our continuous improvement program that I'm sort of working on within the consent. So we're working on a variety of different, looking at different policy ways of working and things like that. So this one is the first cab off the rank. So essentially what we're looking at is the road naming policy generally has a 5-year review period. It should have really been reviewed probably last year, but obviously it didn't. When we looked at the policy, the existing published policy, there were quite a few little deficiencies in it, and we felt that it wasn't really fit for purpose for what we're doing now, but also not really able to there were gaps in it, basically. So it didn't provide good guidance for public developers, and it lacked a bit of guidance internally for staff as well. And as a result, I believe that last year there was a spate of council having to approve road names, and this was because it was not realised at the time, because the policy wasn't very clear about it, that to actually have a road name, formal road name, it has to actually be approved by council as a council decision. So there was a backlog that happened last year. So we want to provide better process and direction for developers, and also ensure a consistent approach by council. And we see that as a small step in terms of activating growth, providing a continuous improvement of what we're doing, better service, basically. So the draft policy, what's different is it really provides a better overview of the process at the beginning. So it actually sets out what happens, who has to do what, and things like that. It sets out different requirements between public and private roads. And the reason why there's a difference between the public and private roads is because road naming is actually council gets the power to do road names through the Local Government Act 1974, not 2002. So it was one of the few parts of the 74 Act that, for whatever reason, was never repealed and replaced in the 2002 Act. And the definition of a road within this 1974 Act is a little wee bit different from what you would normally expect. So it doesn't include private roads. So technically, we have no power or automatic power to name a private road. So the way we get around that is to do it through a consent process. So we would have a consent condition where there's a road that will be end up being a private road, asking them to go through the road naming process to get a unique name. We're also looking at providing improved guidance to developers on road naming conventions, style guides and things like that, so that they can, it's easier for them to select a name. So if you know, whether it's a way, a road, a lane, or whatever. So the back end of the policy, it actually sets out a style guide. That style guide is quite consistent with other councils, and I've actually utilised and made sure it's consistent, for example, with Whangarei District, so that our neighbouring councils are similar, so people working across council bounds, it was, can expect something fairly similar. And it also provides a process to ensure that where a developer decides that they want a Te Reo name, that name is actually correct and appropriate. I've come across some situations in the far north, for example, where a road name, given a Te Reo name, it was spelt incorrectly, and the end result was that the meaning of that road name was completely divorced from what it was supposed to be. And the community has spent quite a long time trying to get that road name changed back to what it was. So we want to avoid that sort of thing. So in terms of the process, so basically we start off with the Jeez. So we start off with the developer providing an option of 3 different names. And so whether it's a private road or a public road to be vested, if it's a private road, we do that through consent conditions. And then if the name is a Te Reo name that they decide that they want to use, then we'll actually pass that through council's iwi relations team, and they will confirm the name to make sure that it's spelled correctly. And if they have to go and talk to people, then they'll go and do that. Then it goes, once we've decided on it, we'll go through to LINZ for their approval. So ultimately, all road names are also going to be approved by LINZ. If that's not approved by LINZ, then obviously it circles around and we start again. And if everybody's done their job properly, it should go through LINZ, no sweat. Then staff will recommend that name to council. Council makes a decision, and then ultimately the signage will go up, and normally the signage is done by council and paid for by the developer. So that's a general sort of process. In terms of a road vested in council, the main difference is that if somebody chooses a Te Reo name, go to the Kaumatua or appropriate committee that meets every few months, and to endorse that name. So looking at the same issues of spelling, meaning, and things like that. We're not asking them to make a decision or anything like that. All we're asking them is for their endorsement, and we'll work with the developer and the iwi to sort out a appropriate solution. And that all obviously goes back to LINZ and then down through the council approval process.
Councillor,
So that's pretty much.
you have a question?
Yes. Through the mayor. What would happen if the name was Dalmatian or Gaelic or any other of the cultural groups that are here who are set up? Are we checking that, or do we just?
So through the chair, within the rules, what we say is that it needs to be identifiable. So if you're talking about Gaelic, for example, that's quite a complex language as I understand it. I don't know much about it, but so we would probably look at whether that name is pronounceable, was easily, so it needs to sit in those rules. So yes, we would have to check that sort of thing. I'm not familiar with those other languages. So
in this flow chart here, would we look for the LINZ approval, would we? Would that fit in there?
That would probably fit in there, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Sean, did you not get my email?
Through the chair, sadly, no.
So I just got a notice, I just
Yeah.
opened it up, received 10:30 last night that the message hadn't got through, which I'd sent the night before.
Yeah, I haven't been on my email this morning.
It got rejected, so.
Right.
And I just discovered that, so.
Right.
Because there are some things, Mr Mayor, I actually requested, I'm not sure if this will circulate to everybody, I requested a Word copy of the policy so that I could have a go at it. Like I like the general direction it takes, but there are some technical details which I think could do with some amendment. And one of which is I would like to see the term private road basically deleted from the policy and replaced by the term private way. Because in the definitions section of the Local Government Act, section 315, there's several forms of public road, one of which is a public road intended for use by the public. A private road is defined as something which is on private land but intended for use of the public. And that represents a lose-lose situation, because if you think if the public are going to suffer harm in that situation, so sorry to be blindsiding you, Sean, but this is how I was explaining. Hopefully I'll get the message through to you. If the expectation that the public will use the road, then that raises the potential for liability against the council, which we don't need. So either we have a public road or we have a private way. Private way consists of a right of way or a jointly owned access lot. And that's, use the generic term private way. For other forms of public road are an access way. And so there was one place I think where the term access way is used, but private, when in fact, in terms of definition, it's public. That's where it's like a walkway. Council. There's also a service lane, which is where it's primarily intended for vehicles and not for pedestrians. So there's, the definition is, it's quite helpful to divide these things up in terms of what applies. But I think what the policy cleverly does is, because the council's authority for road naming is under section 319J is just for public roads, we still need to have an orderly arrangement for dealing with those private shared accesses. Now, private shared access, like a right of way or a jointly owned access lot, is one where it is only for the owners of the land and their invitees and workmen, that sort of ilk, are entitled to use them. So to some extent, as long as we require the thing to be built safely, the council is protected from liability. So those are the nature of the things that I've put in actually, I did copy it to Sue as well as Sue.
Yeah, I haven't read it, sorry.
But you got it.
I haven't looked.
No, don't mind.
Well, this,
I went through about 10 o'clock on Monday night.
you just look at it and see it through and assess at that time, before we bring it back to the finalisation of the policy.
Okay.
Comments you've made.
Yeah, through the chair, I'm expecting to do a few little minor tweaks and things like that to the policy before it comes back to full council for approval. And that's because since preparing this policy, we've had feedback from different areas, obviously including Councillor Vincent. So we'll take that feedback, and if it's necessary to make tweaks, then we will look at doing that.
It certainly wouldn't be intended to change the direction of the policy, but there's just some matters of detail which I think we can make use of what's in the Act for clarity.
Okay, Councillor Paniora, you got your hand up there?
Yeah, thank you. I just had some questions for clarification. So around the flow chart, in terms of permission on te reo names, is that because Article 2 of the treaty or Te Tiriti o Waitangi as the constitutional founding document of New Zealand that guarantees the protection of taonga, i.e. te reo Māori, and that it's not incorrectly used or used without authority. Is that why te reo is specific to other minor, well, I forget the wording, but what was considered other cultures, minority cultures, and why there's a distinction?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't think we can answer that question so much. I think at the high level, it's simply about making sure that if somebody wants to use the Te Reo name, that they don't make a mess of it and we get it right. That's it, plain and simple.
Like Kikapo.
Yeah, through,
There's
through
not a flow chart for every other language is specifically because Te Reo is one, an official language of New Zealand, and two, a guaranteed taonga under Te Tiriti o Waitangi.
I think CE Maris explained the intent pretty clearly. Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins.
Thank you. Does this council, as in the elected members, have to approve every road name?
that is correct, through the chair, yeah.
Oh. Yeah, one of those things.
Through the chair. So the developer will, I mean, road names are very personal to a lot of people in terms of the developer often. I mean, probably not for Manawa Central, but for smaller developers. So they want a name that has meaning to them. So that's why we ask 3 different names. But ultimately, we've got to go through a process, and it is council's final decision is what happens. So we ultimately pick the name, but in consultation and with guidance from the developer.
Yeah, it's one of those things where there's a lot of work done before it even lands on our table. And we're just really doing a check to size it feels. And maybe one day we'll care. But the developers, you know, they, like you say, they're the ones that have the connection to the development, and they're the ones who are choosing the name. So I just wanted to double check, so next time it comes across, I'll just do my job.
Through the chair, just to clarify, one of the main reasons we're doing this meeting is not to get the names. Council chair, go through this, make sure.
Yeah, but what I mean is that process happens before it even reaches, like, we're not doing the checking.
No.
We're just going, cool name.
Yeah, Councillor Larson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, thanks, Sean. I just want to clarify, I didn't quite catch it. What we're doing with these private access ways, where we can't approve names for them, but we want to have consistency so that like what happens, like essentially a private landowner can put up whatever signs they can within our bylaws.
So through the chair, what we do is when the developers is done, they apply for resource consent. We include a condition of consent that requires them to name the roads that need to be named or ways that need to be named. We require them to name it in accordance with this, and follow this policy to do that. And then once that road name is sorted out, then it can be signed off under section 221, along with all the rest of the sign off things for a subdivision. So it's not every subdivision that this occurs. So we're only interested in where it's giving access to 6 or more lots, and that's tied back to Lynn's requirement. They'll only recognise A to E on different lots. So if you have a road, a single number, then you can have the single number as the core number, then that number A, B, C, D, and E. Beyond that, they won't recognise it. So if there's 8 or 10 lots coming off in a particular subdivision, then we would need to actually ensure that either there's a road that's vested in council, or more than likely a private road put in place and that's built to engineering standards and has a road name. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yes, to some extent, yeah. I mean, do you want feedback as well, or are you just wanting to have questions, your worship?
I got distracted there. Anyone can provide feedback by email, or if you want to provide feedback now.
Yeah, well, if we're at that point of the proceedings, I mean, my feedback is I think it's a good idea to do the spelling checking, and ensuring that there's no duplication. I think it's a step too far to require a formal endorsement, because ultimately it's a decision of the council legally. And I do support the sort of questions that Councillor Lambeth was asking. I mean, there's all sorts of different cultures, languages, sensitivities. I don't know that the response that Gaelic is a particularly complex language was of any relevance. They're not going to be, it's not like the sign is going to be speaking the language. It's just got words that can be read, whether they're less or more pronounceable in one language or another is a matter of contention. But so I think we should keep it simple. Should be primarily, in my opinion, largely up to the person who's developed the property and put the name forward. Council has a function to approve it, but I think we ought to not tie ourselves up in knots with multiple layers of approval based on too many different things. Just make sure that they're spelt the same, spelt in an acceptable way, and that they're readable and they're not duplicated. Keep it simple. Thank you.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just one comment I'd like to make, which I think is one of the really clever little pieces that you might not have noticed in the policy, is where two ends of a legal road which have been formed but not joined up, the requirement for them to have different names. So I think there was the experience, could have been over 20 years ago, where an ambulance being directed from Auckland to a particular address followed the road address and found then they came to a halt, and I think there was someone that had a heart attack and tragically they died because of the delays in getting to the property. And that's where having different names would hopefully minimise the risk of that happening.
Councillor Lambeth.
And just to carry on from that, sorry, thanks through the mayor, but just to carry on from that, emergency services is where the critical thing, and we just look, you know, one prime example, Doctors Hill Road and Doctors Road, and two on the neighbouring districts of Whangarei and Kaipara, you know, that's a disaster. You know, there's other ones which just have a different vowel somewhere along the line and different pronunciations by different people. So although it seems, you know, it is serious, it can be. So it is important and it is serious.
Councillor
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick clarification. So all these names are first referred to LINZ for clearance, right? And I guess, I mean, just for our information, they get rid of all those names which are not permitted, like New Zealand Street or something like that. Is that right or not? But we don't want to be confused and flustered dealing with names which may be not permissible.
Through the chair, a lot of that will be done before it even gets to LINZ, because the policy actually clarifies what names are not appropriate, and we'll make a decision internally on that if a name we don't believe is appropriate. The LINZ approval process is they will check it against their database and ensure that we're not duplicating the name, or the name is not too close to something else, and they will then come back and provide the approval for it. And that, because we don't have that ability to check whether there's a duplicate name, and particularly cross-boundary cases like Doctors Hill Road, it's quite difficult to check. So LINZ does that on a national basis.
Just a corollary to that, so taking it a little bit further. So when you said we are not duplicating name, in Auckland there are 6 Allen Street and, you know, so many streets common. So in coming to Te Reo names as well, they can clarify it lanes itself. So we don't have to deal with that extra feature of getting it clarified. Can you please clarify on that with them?
The primary reason for the extra step with Te Reo names is to make sure it's spelt correctly and it's not inappropriate and it matches the area and things like that. And so these are considerations that I myself would not be able to do at all. So I would rather ask somebody that's got some expertise in that area what their opinion is, and that's essentially what we're doing. We're not asking iwi to name the roads or decide whether a name, what that name should be or anything like that. All we're asking for them is to check it over, make sure that they're happy with it. I've used the word endorsement because that's a level down from approval. So I'm shying away from the word approval.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Sean. It's an interesting subject, is that it's so important to have our roads and our namings and all that. Yet we don't even think about it, really when you go around and you look at them. So I think that from what I hear is that there's all the checks and balances already. I think I agree with Councillor Larson, is that, we've got to make it as simple and straightforward and easy. It's in the hands of the developers largely, and I think that that's right, and they've got the right to have the choice. We've got the checks and balances for where we go. Let's keep it simple, and let's see a great variety. Names come through.
Yeah, through the chair, just make the comment that we would only not approve the preferred name of a developer if there was a clear issue with it, i.e., there was another name just down the road that was same or very similar. Our preference is to go with the preferred name given to us by the developer. The three names is really just to give us some options in case that happens.
I think the point really I'm making is that it's important that the clarity and the simplicity is there in that dialogue with the person, the developer who was wanting or needing to make the names.
Right. Sarah Wilson-Collins.
Thank you. Just to provide my feedback. So overall, the policy I think is really good, and it's interesting because when I think of some of the road names we have in our district, like similar names close together and names that don't make a lot of sense, we have those in the past. So it's good to see that this policy moving forward will ensure a sensible approach to road naming, and I understand the process that needs to go through. I was just commenting earlier on like the last from us kind of just, all the work's done by the time it gets there, which is appreciated. As far as the Te Reo and iwi endorsement is concerned, I fully support that. I'm sure back in Ireland, if they do want to name something in Gaelic, they probably have a formal process that they go through with their version of their cultural identity over there. So I think it makes a lot of sense that we are double checking with our iwi whether it's appropriate. I just earlier when the CE was talking, I'm reminded of it's not a street, but last year I visited Lake Tekapo in the South Island, and everyone down there is fed up with how wrong their name is, and it's actually originally Takapo. And if you're any versed into there at all, you'll understand why Tekapo is an inappropriate name. So avoiding those things, I think, is absolutely necessary. So I appreciate the work you put into the policy, and I endorse it.
Okay, that's just question it out. I just want to have one say on it. With the Te Reo names on your bullet points there, you've got whether another name may be more appropriate. I'd like to just put a comma there, but the final selection remains with the developer. I mean, I've done a bit of street naming, and I still find it really annoying what happened at North Council, because I'd read a book on the Union Steamship Company in New Zealand, which had lots of boats that were named both in Mary and European. But I wanted to call after famous blokes that had come up here, you know, traditionally in the 1800s, and they got taken off and council put their names in there. I think when you put so much energy in your business, etc., into a subdivision to try and get the best result, it's quite personal, and it's nice that people can have the options to name their streets as long as they are in every way. Councillor Larson.
I just want to come back to your flow chart, Sean, because I think that, you know, as I've said, I think it's appropriate that we make sure we correctly for the local area and all that sort of stuff. The way that your flow chart works in terms of endorsement is it doesn't have a yes and a no, and so it's basically a power of veto.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a endorsed, but it's still considered appropriate and approved, because otherwise the approval can't occur, and then the developer is in limbo land where he can't actually go, well, I'm happy with it. It's been checked, because you could end up with a whole lot of subjective interpretation that you can't get past.
Yeah, through the chair, I'd just like to clarify that the flow chart you've got up on the screen there is intended for this meeting to try and visually explain a process. And there are, trying to fit it onto one page, there are a few limitations to that, to make it, simplifications to make it to follow and still explain all things. So this flow chart doesn't appear in the policy. It is just intended to give a representation of what the process is. To a large extent. So I do take your point that of deficiency in this flow chart. But yeah, as I say, I think that I'm confident that the actual policy does provide the appropriateness there.
Thanks for that, Sean. I just think it is appropriate for that to be raised, because if it isn't, then this is on the public record. Yep. And it is being put up as part of the discussion of the policy. And so it could reasonably be relied on as, well, we were showing what the policy did, and this is what was in the diagram. We've had you clarify that now, in fact, it does have deficiencies. It's fine.
Yeah. Through the chair, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sean. We'll move on now. So the next one on our list is customer experience strategy, presented by Hayley Pennington. Welcome, Hayley. Yeah.
Street does development. Street.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, councillors. I will take you through the customer experience strategy. I'll take the report and strategy itself as read, but feel free to ask questions at any time. So a bit of a background. First of all, it is a KPI of Jason's to improve our customer perception survey results. But in terms of the customer experience, we've been working on this since 2020 at Kaikoura District Council. We had on-brand partnerships join us at the beginning of the year in 2020 prior to COVID lockdown. And we set up a wide group of front-facing staff to facilitate workshops and feed into the strategy itself. We identified different customer groups and journey mapped their experiences. So builders, elderly, real estate agents, things like that. So identified clear pain points and maps for their work, and we developed the process around CORE, which stands for Connected, Open, Reliable and Easy. Obviously, we had COVID lockdown then, and while a bit of work went on in the background with changing of restructures, this was slightly set on the shelf. So we are re-implementing this and re-embedding it. Our annual resident survey goes out in 3 waves across all of our residents. So from the role, so whether you're a ratepayer or a renter, it doesn't matter, we will send you our survey. And that's the opportunity for our customers to tell us what they think about us across a whole range of areas. What we do know in terms of contact, the first point of contact is usually through our front-facing officers, field officers, or our customer services team. And we find that the results speak for themselves. We've got a 72% satisfaction rating for those services, which is great because our benchmark is 70% to reach. However, when that customer asks to raise a service request and asks for further information, we hand over to another area of the business or another team. That satisfaction rating drops down to 26%. So that's a big drop. And the reason we believe that happens is because we've got quite a siloed approach currently to customer experience. We have a portfolio that is led by me called the Customer Experience Portfolio. So straight away, if you're not within my portfolio, there is a bit of a perception that this is maybe Hayley's team's mahi, not mine. So we need to remove those siloed processes and approaches. And also, yourselves have given us strategic goals and future directions. So to make Kaipara the place to be, we need to make it easier to work with us, and also we need to have a strong customer focus. So the strategic purpose of the customer experience strategy is to assist Jason in meeting his KPIs, to meet council expectations, so what the customer thinks we should be doing and how they think we should be serving them. Having clear roles and responsibilities in around customer experience, so amending JDs so that it is leadership and everyone's responsibility to support customer experience. And obviously the biggest one is to improve those annual resident survey results. So we want to see a continued increase. We need to improve our processes. So a lot of council processes are built to support what we need to do internally. So how do we tick the boxes to get through the process? What we need to do is improve our processes by saying, if you are a person calling in wanting a building inspection or something like that, what is that process and how does that look like for you? And how can we streamline that process to make it more efficient and more beneficial for you? Then obviously we need to align the whole business to strengthen that service delivery satisfaction. So there's a lot of people that deliver services across the business. It's not just within my team. And so we need to align the business to that and create some common goals. So the KDC experience clearly calls out CORE, which is connected, open, reliable and easy. And we need to make that an achievable goal across all touch points for customers. And also we need to establish clear outcomes and measures. So there's no point saying, this is what we want to do, it's all shiny with bells on. We need to actually be able to measure and clearly say, Q1 we achieved this, Q2 we achieved this, and have a clear result that we want to achieve through our customers' perceptions. So we've got some clear outcomes and measures within the strategy, but what those outcome measures really wrap up to is targeted training and development. So we want some clear competencies developed, whether or not you're a leader, a field officer, back office, whatever your role is, you'll have clear competencies to do with the customer. So it might be internal or external customers. And also developing and improving our onboarding and inductions. So we want to leverage those teams that are nailing it in that customer experience. So if you're onboarded and you're in a service delivery role or a front-facing role, our preference is that you sit with the customer service team, listen to the calls, understand how they're treating our customers and working with them. We want to roll out this full customer experience strategy through a change initiative. So we're thinking July would be a good time to start in the new financial year once the structure's been confirmed. And really build that across the entire business as a clear focus so people understand the KDC experience is an initiative that we need to get out and all be behind. Again, where the training and development, we'll begin that with our front-facing teams. So in that service delivery area, we will improve their responses and their processes.
And then we'll implement a quality assurance program and reporting. So like I said, we need some clear checks and balances. We need to be going back in and having someone that's not within the building team or the noise control team to be able to look and see whether or not those processes are actually improved, and whether or not they're meeting their measures. But I guess really at the end of the day, the proof's in the pudding, right? So we know we're doing a good job when there's way less escalations on social media. So people like to, the word of mouth is not so much word of mouth anymore. They like to share their experiences via Facebook or Twitter/X or whatever you want to call it. We want to reduce that amount. We want people to be calling us and telling us first. And we also want to reduce the amount of escalations that go to elected members as well. It's not good enough, in my opinion, that people feel that they need to come to elected members to get a result. They should feel that they're able to achieve that same result coming through the business. And obviously, finally, the annual resident survey metrics reporting, we need to increase.
Councillor, no.
Chair, just a quick clarification and a question. So 72% of people are happy with the first contact, and then it drops down across the council to 26% people being happy. 74% are not happy with all the parts of the council. So this is a grave concern, right? So can we somehow nail it? Why they're not happy? Is it just the delivery or is it just the contact? Nobody calls after that?
No, so we get in our verbatim comments from our customer annual resident survey, what our customers think. So it is either taking too long to come back to us, not enough information, or really high level technical information that they weren't able to understand. There's so many different reasons why people are unhappy, but most of the time it is that we're just not open and connected to the customer. So we're not being transparent with the information that we're providing, or we're providing way too technical information that they're having to sort through, and we leave that to the customer to deal with.
It does not include the service request or issues with the complaints on bills and all. This is general.
And so the customer perception survey goes out to, we aim for about 1,000 people a year. And so each wave we get around about 300 returned results. Not all of those people have had recent interactions with customer, with KDC. So it could be a historical thing that they've just remembered. It was hard work dealing with KDC in this instance, or I made a complaint about a dog and then I saw that dog, 3 days later on the road, or things like that. So it's really us taking accountability of the information we provide, the way we provide it, and the timeliness that we do that.
Thank you.
The other thing I was going to ask you, Heidi, is, like, I know these things are difficult to break down to measure. And for example, I spoke to several people this week who said that they had wonderful experiences with the building team, that they'd helped them get through their problems. They'd said, this is how we can make it quicker for you. You haven't done this, but you can do that, So I was pleased from my point of view. It showed that the CE's memorandum had got through to staff about, making it easy for people to get their processes put through.
Yeah, and I would say that this is from the bottom up, and it is really a cross-functional approach to customers. So we've workshopped this across the business. We've shared this with ET, the leadership team, and from all front-facing roles. So all of this information is fed up across, and so there is buy-in already across the business. It's not that this is coming out of nowhere and being forced onto staff by ET. It really is a groundswell approach to dealing with customers.
Councillor Lambert.
Very quickly, this survey, is it done in other councils? If so, how do we look amongst others?
So all councils survey their customers in different ways. Key Research, I think, does about 30 or 40 of the 67 councils. We stack up in the bottom third. Yeah, so, but we do flex and change. So, in 2019, we were in the top third. So, yeah, it just depends on where other councils are. At the moment, Bulla has a rates increase of about 31%. So, therefore, their latest annual resident survey results are really quite low. So, there's a lot of impacts in it, and it's local influences that can take part in those.
Councillor Mawson, comments?
Thank you. I just wanted to comment, I'm not surprised, wasn't surprised to see the result for the front facing staff. I just want to make the comment that there's some excellent people working on the front desks at council. My experience is more in Dargaville than Mangawhai, though I'm sure Mangawhai must be performing very well to get such a good result. But in Dargaville, I've witnessed those front facing staff just doing a fantastic job, and I'm really proud to go in there and see them dealing with what can sometimes be people who really need a lot of assistance and maybe feeling a bit frustrated and they diffuse the situation as well. They get the right information and they're just brilliant. I can't praise them enough. So saying that out loud in case they're listening.
Yeah, I totally call that 100%. I'm really lucky to have the team that I do in that front facing area, and it is a passion and it's a skill. Let's not forget, not everyone is great at customer services. And so it takes a real type of person to be able to be resilient and empathetic and, really be able to handle de-escalations and, supporting elderly through, maybe what might be a 2-minute interaction, but actually takes 5-10 minutes. We're really, really lucky in Kaipara to have the people that we do in those front-facing roles. So next.
Councillor Howard, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Hayley. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Hayley, I'll echo Councillor Wilson-Collins' comments because personal experience in person and on phone and generally from people in the community is always positive. Right? There are 2 questions I do have. Are there any specific lessons or insights that we can learn by accepting what you say about the benchmark will move because of relative scales for other councils? But are there any specific lessons that we can learn from the changes in our status from 2019 to where we are now? That's one. The second one is, what is our strategy on a closeout of a query? Do we have for anything that has been, and I suspect there would be a level of engagement to make this happen, but do we actually close out with anybody who's made an inquiry or to say, is this completed to your satisfaction? And so, we get an immediate sense, or if there's something still outstanding that is irking them.
Yep, so my customer services manager runs a regular report on service requests, and she is a professional stalker and harasser. So she will call different areas of the business, the waters team, the building team, resource gazettes, whoever it is, it doesn't matter. And we'll say, why is this service request open? What are we doing about it? What's the next steps? Update it, please. So we do have someone that is checking and pushing that. However, what we need is a culture so that it's not just a single person that's really chasing people to do it. It's something that comes naturally, and people do close and update their service requests and do follow up with the customer and let them know what the outcome is, because that is something that we have noticed, is that our field officers or whoever might close off a service request because they've done their piece of mahi, but they have not called the customer to advise them that that piece of work has been completed.
Thank you. That to me, in any customer service, is that you've got to know that the customer is happy at the end of the day and the job is done to their satisfaction, not ours.
Yes, and we don't exist without our customers at council. It's our whole business. The other question you asked was, can we learn anything between 2019, 2020 and now? I would say one thing that we do have now compared to then is way more people responding to our survey. So our survey used to be a phone survey and a mail survey. Now it's online and a mail survey. And so our responses have more than doubled. And so I would say some of our results and our changing results is because we've got more input and less of a narrow view. But one thing I would say is that over time, our communications have improved. But I think over lockdown and remote working and things like that, that our connection has sort of disappeared. So we've got quite a siloed approach at the moment, and that's something that I know that Jason and Sarah are working on with our restructure and our proposed structure. But yeah, it really is that cross-functional, connected, so customer services know what noise are doing, who's on the roster, that sort of thing.
Yeah, okay. Oh, good. I think you've got it covered. Thank you.
Mr Lambert.
Just to clarify on from that, does everyone who submits a consent or is an agent for a building consent, do they automatically get a survey or?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that, yeah.
Yep, so the building team and the consenting team, I think Lloyd's sitting in the background, I'm pretty sure you have your own surveying. Not yet, it's on the horizon.
But the building team.
We definitely do.
It's the 3 Mr Mayor, so we've reported that the results of the building survey to the development committee, I believe.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've made the points very separate from this customer service, because of the low numbers that you get.
Yeah, personally, I'm sort of on a conflicted thing where I've told them that I won't be doing it because it's community. Yeah.
No, that's, yeah. One of the reasons we would like more surveying directly for people that are dealing with building and resource consenting is because when we send out our customer perception survey to that group of 300 people, it's, we're not targeting people that have raised resource consent. So sometimes the sample size is maybe 1 or 2 people and it's just too small to be able to create analysis on. So yeah, like I said, Jason, sorry.
No, followed by Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I'm delighted that you're saying that you look into the processes because in 2019, when I think there was very good service at the front desk then, and it's still now, which is good. But end of the day, that was the grudge of the people that find peace in the beginning, but nothing gets done. So I think we have to actually drill down, and that's not my role, that's probably see to look at. And what are the weak links? Why the things are not happening in whatever requests they have? Is it delegation or is it process or why it's taking too long?
We have done, we have themed pain points quite recently, and so we do have a good view of where those pain points sit, and we are working internally to.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm wondering, with the mail outs and so, is it possible to photocopy the survey and do duplicate copies of a response?
Like a customer filling in their response and photocopying it and sending it back in, or
a customer offering me his survey because he didn't want to do it.
Look, you wouldn't be able to complete a survey because you're an elected member, and so you would.
It's just that, that 76% result doesn't happen by itself,
No, but look, we're happy to get anyone to submit those back. So if we did submit a survey out to someone and they handed it to their neighbour to return, that's not an issue. It just to have those results.
Yes. It was testing, actually.
So in terms of next steps, obviously our org structures to be confirmed on Friday. We want the customer experience change initiative to begin from July and working through the next financial year, because that will be able to clearly show us improvements through our annual resident survey to align the years together. Our training and development will begin with our front-facing service delivery teams as our initial focus, but we will be rolling this out to the entire business. Customer experience is something that we want everyone to take ownership of, and we want to implement that quality assurance program and reporting. So that's creating clear checkpoints, transparent reporting, and then demonstrating what we've done on our external website. So customers have said, we want you to do this, and then we publish on the website. You told us, therefore we made the following changes or improvements. So we want to be able to clearly show that their feedback has made a difference and created change within the business. That's the customer experience. Okay.
No, I think it's really positive, and thanks for all your work in this. It's made a real difference.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to see. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Heidi. Okay, item 4, reinstatement 3/2/21, the old provisions Maori wards. Sarah Morris will present this item in person. Welcome, Sarah.
How are you?
Whoa. Take a constant go.
Through the chair, I will take the report as read. This is literally a signal from the central government that we're keeping you abreast of the intent to enact a piece of legislation at the end of July, which will reinstate the mechanism by which authorities have been monitored. It's applicable for us particularly because we're one of the councils that didn't instate our Māori ward, but we did not have a poll on it, which was a previous requirement for you could do that. That was requirement that was taken away in about 2022, I believe, and this government is proposing to bring that requirement back. So because we didn't have a poll at all to start with, they're saying that we're going to have, the proposal will have two options when this piece of legislation passes. The first option will be that we disestablish, we being council disestablishes the existing Māori ward, or you either can do that or you have to have a poll at the next local government election, so that would be next year. If you choose option 1, you will still be able to have a Māori ward, but you do have to have a poll. So basically you're saying, well, we didn't have a poll, and we recognise that this government says that they're very happy with that, and the bill says you have to have a poll. So we're going to confirm that we will have a poll next year in October, or we're going to just confirm we'll disestablish the Māori ward and make a decision on that poll at another time. There are other implications from this decision. We might be required to have a rep review. And if you remember, Dale of CSP came and spoke to us late last year and ran us through that process, that papers including your information for you to review. And there's a cost associated with that. So for a full rep review, it's about $25,000, we think. It's an estimated cost. However, because the bill that is to go to Parliament has not been finalised, we believe there might be some options that will come through in terms of a light rep review or potential other variations on that. We don't have that information at the moment, and we won't have that information until much closer to the time. If the bill is enacted, the earliest that you could take action as a council, regardless of which way you want to go, would be at your August, would be in August. That would be the earliest you could decision on this particular item. Any question?
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Lambeth.
The review, would it be a full review, not just the Maori ward, but the representation and how we do it?
So at this stage, the indicators we have is that it's everybody, it's a full rep review, but they have indicated there is a light, so that's the light rep review, but we don't know what that looks like at this point in time.
No hints on what that would look like. Okay, thank you.
Further questions, Erin Wilson-Collins, followed by Councillor Howard.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm just trying to get it clear in my head about the two options and the costs involved. So, so option 1, if this council result to disestablish sorry, did you say that there would still be a poll held?
So if the council decides to disestablish the Māori wards, at the moment, the information we've been given says that you can just, that's just what happens.
Right.
If you wish to have a Māori ward, or there is the community that says they'd like a poll and you receive, I believe a certain number of level of interest in that, then you would be, if you were to have a poll to reinstate the Māori ward, it would be at the very next election. So it would be at the 2025, but it wouldn't come into place. The Māori ward itself wouldn't exist until the following election.
Right.
So basically, do you want a Māori ward? Oh, sorry, that's not correct. We have a Māori ward. Will you wish to disestablish it? Yes or no? That'll be your first question. If it's a no, we don't, then nothing changes, but you will have to have a poll in October next year.
Yes.
If you disestablish the Māori ward, you do not have to have a poll next year, but if you wish to reinstate it,
right,
you then have to have a poll.
And so what triggers the rep review?
The fact that, so if you're doing a rep review, to introduce a Māori ward,
sorry,
to reintroduce the Māori ward, if you've taken that path, you have to then do that full representation, look at councillors, demographics, you know, a normal review.
That's the opposite of that, isn't it?
So yeah, if I can just clarify, if you establish the Māori board, when you disestablish or implement a Māori board, you have to do a representation review around that. So Sarah's correct. If your decision is to disestablish the Māori ward, once legislation is passed, then you will be required to do a representation review.
And that's the 25 grand cost.
It's between 20 and 25K for representation review. It depends on how strong it's going to be. So Sarah's indicated it's going to be a representation review light, whatever that means, we don't know. So a normal rep review would be between 20 and 25K to do.
Right.
And then that will apply at the next elections next year.
And how is that paid for?
That comes out from the general rate.
The general rate?
We haven't budgeted for it, so it'd be an unbudgeted expense.
Question, there's no budget for it. Okay.
Councillor Howard, followed by Councillor Paniora, followed by Councillor Vincent.
I'll withdraw at the moment, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Paniora.
Thank you. So my question is, so if the rationale is that it'll be disestablished because there was no poll to establish it, then how is it justified that this council sitting around this table come August has the authority to disestablish a ward without holding a poll?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll take that one. Look, it is the legislation. And when the legislation comes in the direction and legislation imposed by central government on local government changes, then we have to adjust to it.
My second question is, how is it legal for a council to disestablish a ward when we could then disestablish some of the general wards? Because it's a ward that's now here.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I suppose the answer to your question, Councillor Paniora, is the government sets up legislation, which is the law. Then we need to do what we need to do under that law. So the legalities of what the government are doing is with the government and their process, and they get all that checked when they implement their laws. We just have to do what they say.
Yeah, following up from that question that it's the government and they implement laws, they're not actually making a law, they're sitting on the fence and kicking it down to council. So that's what I'm asking, how is it legal for council to make that decision? The government's not making the decision, they're saying that councils can decide.
The government will be changing, let's be fair, I mean, they haven't changed it yet. The government has indicated that they will be changing the legislation. Legislation then is the law, and that provides the mechanism for the council. The minister has been very clear in his letter, which is on the agenda, the options that will be available. So that then becomes your choice as a council to make a decision on that in accordance with the legislation that they've enacted.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I did put in a question on, see, it was Sunday night, afternoon. If an idea of the cost of the representation review, which I can see logically would follow a decision to disband the Maori ward because of a redistribution of those potential votes. But I've asked for an indication of the cost of a referendum, because if we're doing one of the options would be for us to undertake a referendum before finalising a decision. Well, what's the cost of that?
So I can get that through you, Mr. Mayor. So a referendum held in accordance with the election at the same time is roughly $5,000 additional cost to the referendum at the time of an election, and that's what the option is. So rep review, decision to disestablish Māori ward, if that is how you go, then the representation review, 20 to 25K is the unbudgeted cost for that. If you, the other option which Sarah outlined is if you do a poll as part of the election next year, then that's a $5,000 additional cost for that.
And then following that in the subsequent years is the prospect of a representation review.
Depending on the outcome. And so with that later option during the poll, that means the Māori ward will be in place for the next term. If you do a poll, you take the poll option, and then whatever is the outcome will be effective from the 28 elections.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There are just clarification, just on option one and option two, it seems to me from what you've got here, that either way, we are up for the cost of whether it be a representation review or referendum, whatever. There is a cost because, as you say, if we take option one, it will also be required to undertake a representation review. And in option two, we held a binding poll. So there is a cost associated with either option.
Can I just clarify, and sorry, Sarah, for jumping in. So under option one, which is the disestablishment, you then have two sub-options, shall we call them. So, you either do the representation review at the cost, which is up to 20 to 25 grand, right? Or you revert back to the previous representation review, so the previous ward boundaries and governance model prior to the Māori ward. So you do have that option, which would then come as no cost.
Okay, understand.
But that becomes a decision for you as a council to make.
So the further question is, what is the cycle of representation reviews in terms of in just normal business? Is it every third election?
Every 6 years.
Every 6 years. So we're coming up to that.
Well,
anyway, aren't we?
This council has, because one of the factors with representation reviews is the growth component, right? And how often and how quick that changes through the various wards in the district, and then how that affects representation, etc. So we've, in the last 6-7 years, done 2 representation reviews, by memory. The council has decided to do it quite regularly because of that growth aspect. And obviously late last year, this council decided not to do it as well. But now obviously the government's changing that.
Yep. Thank you.
The options there.
Councillor Paniora.
Yeah, so just so I can get this right in my head. So option one, the first sub-option, to disestablish with a truncated representation review could cost up to 20,000, which is unbudgeted. The second sub-option of option one is to revert to the previous ward boundaries at no cost. And then the third option, or the official option two, is to hold a binding poll, which will appear in the envelope, the voting packs, and that'll be an extra $5,000. Is that correct? So correct. 20,000 or nothing, or 5,000. And then, so if we're to decide, the majorities to decide to say disestablish, but apply option 1B, which is to revert back to the old boundary, the old boundaries, and then that would have to follow a binding poll anyway, wouldn't it? So that would be as a matter of course.
It wouldn't necessarily need to have a binding poll. I don't really actually understand your question, to be honest. So if we revert back to the previous ward boundaries.
Yeah. Well then, and then disestablish, then there's still the government's been saying that they still want to hold binding polls for the councils that never had polls. So you'll still have to get a poll regardless of what option A or option B is chosen.
No, sorry. With option one, the 2 sub-options, right? Option one is disestablish. That's the trigger point. If you disestablish, then the sub-option is to do a representation review, and that would be binding on the next elections. I mean, that representation review. Sub-option 2 is to revert back to the previous governance model, shall we say, for that elections. That's it.
But Jason, that would mean that the council would make the decision to disestablish the Māori ward, but then not actually provide the ratepayers with that poll. That is the whole point of disestablishing, is because there was no binding poll held in the first place. So there would have to be, for the integrity of this council, if they were to disestablish, would have to make sure that there's a binding poll in the October election, surely. So then that's still going to be a cost to the council. And then, can I just finish here? If we do disestablish the ward and then there's no ward in place for 2025, then another representation review would have to occur if the poll says that the ward should stay. We would then have to have a further representation review to re-establish it for 2028. So effectively, we could see ourselves doing 2 representation reviews between here and 2028 based on the outcome.
So through you, Mr Mayor, your first point, that's what the government has directed, and they're your decision points. So that is what it will be. It tells you when you need to do a representation review or a poll, and for option 1, disestablishment, there is no need for a poll. So if you disestablish the Māori ward, you don't have to have a poll.
But that, I mean, you've taken my point, haven't you? That the whole point that the government's signalling this reform is so that the public actually gets a say. So if this council was to make the decision to disestablish, but then not allow the ratepayer a poll, that would fly in the face of the reason why this second.
Look, I totally accept your point, Councillor Paniora, but the point is made about the government rather than anything we can do about it.
Councillor Nair, followed by Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I read the letter 3-4 times. So if I mean, first of all, the minister said that option 1B, which we are raving about, is under development. But in saying that, all he's saying that if you decide to disestablish the board, Māori board, in 2025 election, all you have to do is a standard representation review. We are to do anyway in 6 years. So there is no cost. So I take your point that the government is somehow encouraging. Sorry?
The cost is only
Can I just finish it? Can I finish it?
Just helping you out there.
No, please don't. So all I'm trying to say is that there is no additional cost on representation review 1, and 2, hold your breath because further clarification is coming. Thank you.
Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins.
Thank you. Just, I'm sure the elected members around the table will understand that if we do a representation review because of a decision we make to do with the Māori wards, we would still have to do a representation review in 6 years because we do them every 6 years. So it is an additional cost because we did one just 3 years ago and 3 years before that. But I'm sure everyone understands that. But my question, talking about reverting back to the old ward boundaries, I'm interested to understand that because those ward and how that it doesn't, how we can just do that because that came about from a representation review. Like our previous ward boundaries were not fit for purpose. So how can we revert back to that?
Through you, Mr Mayor, look, I can't really answer that question. I mean, it's a sentence in the letter from the minister and it just provides an option. I'm hopeful that we have more detail that will come out about all of that.
Okay, so there is a bit of a question mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Then there's a signalling letter and people in the sector are working with the government on this and DIA.
Thank you.
Councillor Larson.
I suspect you probably got to this point anyway, but could I respectfully suggest that we wait until the bill is passed and see what we've got before we go in?
Yeah, that's the message I get out of this. It's still a lot of wait and see, isn't it? Okay. So we're being briefed today. We're being briefed today. Thank you, Sarah. And then we will be waiting to see what transpires. Okay, thank you. So we'll have 10 minutes break, for a wee stop.
Through you, Mr Mayor, for those online, we'll be in a workshop on public excluded.
Oh, yeah, for those online, we will be coming back to a publicly excluded workshop. So thank you for your attendance.
So that's.